Hemshech Ayin Beis, Volume 1, we're up to chapter 102, page Kuf Tzadik Vav, 196. Truth is that the last chapter, 101, deserves to be learned again and again and again. And also I found some good words for the word hafla. I was thinking about it because we're looking for wonder, awe. I think two good words is eminence and grandeur. Grandeur is the word I would use. The grandeur of the divine. So, to sum up, I said I think it's worthwhile reading again, but we won't do that. I'll just sum it up. What was Mechadish in chapter 101 over what was being said till now is obviously we're talking about how spheres of Atzilus reveal the divine. So we discussed how they reveal, first of all, it's the interface that reveals, and we are able to comprehend and perceive godliness in this world and feel godliness. Without it, it would not be possible. It would be like an airtight reality, a creation that conceals its source, its creator. Yeah, we would know little minimal things, but you wouldn't have appreciation. I also looked into the Zeir Begin Dishtamudin Bey. The Zeir is a fascinating Zeir. He says that the Sefirahs are there in order for us to recognize God. Because how would we recognize? We'd have no handles. Because God in His own is beyond any description. But now that God manifests the chesed, so when you see chesed in the world, it's a divine attribute. You see gvur in the world, justice, divine attribute. In other words, we have identifiable tools with which to speak about. He goes on there, it's very, very nice. He says, to say God is midas is these attributes, God is beyond the attributes. The example he gives there, interesting, this is Zeir Mamish, not the commentaries. He gives an example of a yam. So a yam is just a one big sea. When the yam touches the land, that's when you begin to, it's still, when it comes to the shore, you still see it as a sea. But then when it comes to land, you're able to make a pit, and you could hold the water. You could take it into a cup. He says, take away the pit, take away the cup, the water runs right back to the sea. So it's like Ein Sof. That's his example that he gives there. And basically says, so first it comes in a general context as Keser. Then it comes into a smaller pit as Chochmah. And Bina is a bigger pit. He gives the whole thing.
Like Kalim.
He says, use the word Kalim, mana, levushim, like Kalim and garments, yeah. There he doesn't go into the opinion there. If you read that literally, it sounds more like only the air doesn't have any tzir and shape. And it's like water, and it's the container that gives the shape. But obviously with the commentaries and the Pardes, based on that Zeir, that's where a lot of the Mukabolim have the disagreements. What is the meaning? Because the Zeir itself you can interpret that the air is like water. So,
You're going to see like an ocean, and that certainly has a...
Yeah, but it's just interesting example in the Zeir itself. And that's begin dish tamud me. A lot of times we know a Zeir, and you look at context, he says, he ends up saying, but this is how we know him, through his attributes. And so obviously with Ayin Beis it goes far deeper. So that's one thing. Then we go further that it's Megala Machshavas Hanalamis in the words of Reb Shem Tov. I just also looked at the Rabbi Shem Tov. I wanted to see. He was in Spain before the gate of Sefirah. So he's like,
We define him.
Online. Sefirah HaMunas. It's the Sefirah HaMunas of Reb Shem Tov. It's anti-Rambam, Ralbag, and Even Ezra in the most harsh way.
He was?
Yeah. He says that they were philosophers. Philosophy was always puzzle. Like a Chassidus. It's Kabbalah, and that's it. And they mixed philosophy, and he's very sharp against the Rambam. Oh. He writes in the opening that this Sefirah HaMunas. And the interesting thing is that his son and his grandson started embracing the Rambam. His grandson you look at Meir Nevuchim, his grandson wrote a Pirush on Meir Nevuchim. He's also Reb Shem Tov, because he's the grandson of the... So it's interesting just to know the history. But he is like fire. I'd love to see that grandfather and grandson. Like a simulation, basically. The Zayd is like arguing against Meir Nevuchim, and the grandson's writing a Pirush on Meir Nevuchim.
Shem Tov is like a last name in that case, because they're all called...
There's no last names then.
Yeah, but you inherit the title Shem Tov, like the Muslim goes...
Yeah, it's like Kohen, the Kohen Tzedek, Katz. Really? Yeah, there were names. I'm not sure where it originates. There's books that talk about. But you're talking about 15th century. You're talking about he lived in 1410 or something. So you're talking about 100 years before the Arizal. Just interesting, it's they had similar debates, you know. I know the name of the Sefer, Sefirah Amunis, so I looked it up in HebrewBooks.org, Sefirah Amunis. If you go, by the way, Google Hebrew is excellent. Type anything in Hebrew, it's like Google in English. It's tremendous. You type in Rabbi Shem Tov, it'll give you everything. Very easy to find today.
Shem, you mean Shem Tov?
In Hebrew, Shem Tev. And today there's Wikipedia in Hebrew. Everything you find in English is in Hebrew. I do a lot of that recently. I just type something in Hebrew. I have Hebrew. There's a typewriter there. You don't need. They have a keyboard that you just on the screen. You just type it and you find Mamish Amachai. It's unbelievable. I mean, I knew this. I knew he wrote Sefer Amunis. I knew that it's not hard to find online. You have these things today, but there they right away give you the shortcuts. And now Sefer Amunis, the whole Sefer is. I was just reading it this morning. The introduction. An attack, but he quotes the Rambam. He's not just like this. He quotes him. He says Harav. He calls him Harav writes this, and Harav writes that. Then he attacks him. He says philosophy. He says Angahak philosophy, and there's no Amunah. It's pretty sharp. Not a steer. Listen, but the point I want to make, going back to he wrote a Sefer Amunis.
Those days it wasn't like.
There weren't many, but the ones that were. And when they wrote, there was no print, there was no Amazon. He wrote, it was a Ksav Yachad, that's what it was. Kabbalah always existed. There's no such thing as a generation without Kabbalah. If you look at the Sefer called Shem Ramunim from Yosef Irgaz, the recent editions have an excellent introduction on the whole story of Kabbalah, how it got from beginning of time to us. Rashbi, what happened after Rashbi? What happened to the Mukabalim after Rashbi? So there was a Maseda. It all goes back to one of the that's for sure. But I'm saying one of the key channels is what was his name? It was Rabbi Yitzchok Saginar. He was a son of the Ravid.
Some people say he wrote.
He was a key because he was the teacher of the Ramban. His name was Yitzchok Saginar. He was blind, but he was a key channel because he passed down what he heard, and the Ramban is a makabel from him. And Ramban was Rosh Makubal, you could see. I mean, in other words, how did it get to the Arizal? I'm talking about the Maseda Ish Mapish. I'm not talking about now Nuvuah Ruch HaKodesh. There's a Maseda. He had very good documentation in Shem Ramunim. Excellent. People don't have no clue, because someone will say, and it's of course if it's Tatum Sinai, everything. Other Mishnah wrote Rizil Hamalach, they say. Yeah, but I'm talking about that's not. I'm talking about practically how to get through the Middle Ages.
Right.
And then when they discovered in the caves, there was the big, until today, secular, most people will say that the Rezer is from, is Yehuda, is what's his name, Isaac de Leon. They don't say it's Rashbi. Gershon, I say he wrote it, basically. Not only Gershon Shalom, a lot of others also. A lot of modern Orthodox will say that.
That Isaac de Leon wrote it.
Yeah. Because it was discovered in the 15th century in caves, in Manitoba and in Cremona in Italy. Two different manuscripts, and people didn't know what it was. The Shem Agdel, the Chidah writes about it. They didn't know what it was. And some people said, well, this, and then they started showing it around. And there were people who knew, said, this is, we know this stuff. It's like, it was like the Gnizah Chesonis. There were the people that knew that it was Zayar. Then it was a big gilly. Others said it was a forgery. That it was just someone wrote it and hid it in a cave. That type of thing.
Whether they had it also?
The Zayar was quoted. It is quoted through the centuries, even before.
Really?
But it was all Baal Peh. It's like Teda Shel Baal Peh before.
Somebody said that he wrote originally every letter in the alphabet. So the other ones quoted too.
It's like Midrashim. It was like for example, you have Rashi. You have the Pirkei Rebbe Lozer, for example, one of the earliest Midrashim. In the Agdama also, the Radal writes all these Midrashim that we don't have a source for it, but it's called Rashi will bring it. Where did Rashi get it? We have nowhere it's printed. So you have to say it's Mekabel from somebody. There's plenty. There's a lot of things like this. There's a lot of and Zayar. So those they said this is Zayar. That's when they realized. Then the real mumchin. Listen. Every generation had real. And it was testified for sure that this is legitimate. Well, technically, the Zayar says that Rashbi, the last day of his life, had Rabbi Abba write down everything he said. He was his maniach, his chayzer, whatever. It says it in the Idra Zutta, where it talks about like Boimer. The last day, we start revealing all the Seides, so he tells Rabbi Abba, you write down everything. Anyway, it's a whole other. Let's go back here. So Atzilus reveals. So we talked at length, that discussion that it reveals all the way up to the 10 hidden spheres, which was the whole Hamshach. And now we're in discussion that's revealing Bligvul. So he began with Hashemayim Mesaprim, which is expression also from Shem Tov, that the heavens, which means the celestial bodies, testify to a Bligvul power. But now he's talking about it far more in the Sefirah. So the main Chiddush, what he's been saying now, is chapter that it's the idea of Laskil Chabina, not Laskil Chabina, the same B'Lebeinu Bina, L'Havin Dover Metech Dover. That from knowing something in a direct logic, you can come to know through it indirect logic. I looked up also that. Some call it negative logic, some call it negative proofs. It's a whole process of elimination. But anyway, so there is through a direct process, which is what you do know, comes to tell you about the same subject matter. We're not talking here the general idea that the more knowledge you have, the more you realize how little we know. Or like you climb a mountain, you realize, wow, there's so much. No, through the knowledge of any particular subject, you come to a point where you recognize and comprehend that that thing has something far greater, which is not quite comprehensible yet. In chapter 101, his emphasis is that it's still Bina, so it's comprehension. It's not that reason brought you to faith. It's not that reason brought you, you know that I understand the world, so I realize that there's a whole part that I'll never understand. No, Bina itself has another dimension where you understand, but it's what you're understanding now is the haflaw of the thing, the grandeur of it. It's a whole different thing. So in other words, it's like a difference between two people looking at this, understanding the same subject matter, and one person is just beginning and learning, okay, I understand. Another person says, no, when you're really going to get to understand, you'll appreciate its grandeur. So that's what he's talking about. That's why I was looking for the word grandeur. Eminence is another word, with an eminent, when you say the eminent king. So that is only possible through Chitzenius Bina. You come to Pnimius Bina. So that's what he says. So he says it's absolutely have asoga, but even have flaw. You understand the haflaw. So basically, Atzilus isn't just teaching us. Let's say that God has chesed, but you realize the haflaw of chesed. Let's take an example. Human beings. We have all these stories of people, unbelievable bali chesed, and then there were people that we didn't know they were bali chesed, and after they died, you realize what they really did. Let's say you knew such a person, but he was anonymous. So someone else will say, yeah, he's about tzedakah, he gives a lot of charity. And you say, well, if you really knew him, it's not just gives charity. This man did things that are beyond. I'm just giving you an example. They're both comprehensive, but one is only if you have intimate awareness and knowledge. I'm just talking about a human being. The same thing is a concept. What does Chochmah look like? What does Bina look like? Okay, we can go and learn the Chassidus. Chochmah is the spark of an idea. Bina is comprehension. But then when you start really learning and saying Chochmah Bina of God, it's not just a spark of an idea and comprehension. There's a whole unbelievable force going on here. In other words, every detail of existence has in it the comprehension of the details of it, and it has a certain sense of grandeur or eminence or magnitude and quality. It's very not similar because he's talking here about telling a story. But if you remember, we talked about numbers. You can look at a number and someone say, "Okay, there's 1,000 things here." And someone say, 1,000 things. These are 1,000 diamonds. The Rebbe said, when you count diamonds, you don't get tired. But all of us would stand and get very tired because it's thousands of people. But you see people, he sees diamonds. You see bodies, he sees souls. Same thing. We're not talking about, again, something beyond. We're talking about in the same thing, you're appreciating a whole different dimension. So that's even how we respect human beings. If you, I was just reading a sikha from Yutes Kislev Tavshach Ches. It's unbelievable. Beautiful, beautiful sikha. The Rebbe speaks about how to look at a Jew. He's talking a lot about the hippies. He talks about the young people. So he says, you look at the Eid, and he says, "Achilik lekam mal mamish." Does zitz achilik lekam mal mamish. So the Rebbe says it. So it's a whole different way. It's the same person. What you see, in other words, so you're appreciating not the so-called the parameters of it and the comprehension, as a Chitzeni is being just the comprehension. You're appreciating a qualitative element that can't even be put in words.
I was getting confused with this. Everything is a chelik l'ka.
Not really relevant here. Not everything is a chelik l'ka, because God is everywhere, but not everything is godly. That's the key here. The bottom line, it comes down to this: the difference between Atzilus and Bria. Let's start with that. Is Atzilus was created in a way that's a gili of Elokus. Bria was created in a way that doesn't reveal the divine. As soon as it doesn't reveal, it conceals. So that's a chiddush. From God, obviously, for Him to do it, He could do either one. It really comes down, above all, it comes down to what is the thing doing on its own? Is it reflecting something that's divine or not? Something that's not a chelik l'ka cannot bring Elokus to others. A stone it does what God wants it to do, but it cannot bring Elokus to others. It can be mefarsim Elokus. So it's a creation of God, but you can't say it's a godly force, a godly agent. It's not a shliach of the Eibishter. It's a nivra of the Eibishter. That would be in the simplest terms. Obviously, the question is, what about Lamaila? Does God see the difference? The answer is that even Giluyim have a difference. It goes back to a Sefer Torah and a table. Why do you stand up in a Sefer Torah walks and not a table? The answer is because the Sefer Torah, al pi Torah, you did something with it, with Kedusha, it was written in a way, and you turned cloth, gosh, the same cloth. They say the same behemoth comes and says, why is this piece of my flesh you stand up for, and this piece of my flesh you throw out in the garbage, you eat? So, good, someone will say, well, you see the difference? Obviously, because we look with the Bosset, with the fleshy eyes, you see flesh. Those that see, the Munach B'Kufsi, you see, like what I said yesterday about Mashiach, you see it, if you have the right eyes, you see it. Okay, so that's Kuf Aleph. I think that's why, I think it's a tremendous chapter, because it's the place, the interface. Doctor, this is important. The interface in the conscious, this is not even unconscious. That through understanding, you come to a place of, it's like when you understand something, at the end of it, you say, oh wow, this is something. You're not talking now, I'm not talking about the beyond. So he calls this Bli Gvul, actually. It's interesting. This is the Bli Gvul and the Gvul, essentially. It's a flaw, the grandeur of something. I like that word. Grandeur of it. Not just a thing. It's true. The Rebbe would say about the Frierdiker Rebbe, if the people knew what they have here, instead, you usually don't appreciate what you have. Okay. Good. So this is Primus Ben. Yeah. Or worse. Yeah, Primus Bina. Excellent. So Bina brings us, so Beivin Dover, Meter Dover. Okay, let's learn Kuf Beis now. Kuf Tzadik Vov, 196. So the interface is alive and kicking. That's what I have to tell you guys. Atzilus is active and making us all a little restless. What?
What's not the translation for
intermediary? Mamutza. I like interface a lot. It's a great word. Interface means it has two faces. And I'm a turguman, a translator. That's another word for it.
From one level to another.
So here speaks Hebrew, this one speaks English. You have someone who speaks both languages. Well, that's simple. On the deeper level, it's someone that can take from one very deep level and bring it to another level and not compromise either one. So the whole Yesod of Ayin Beis is an interface. Everything is, it's all about that. You can't compromise the other one, or else it's like someone who's translating from Hebrew into English, but every second word he misses. That's not a translator. That's like you're only getting a compromised, a diluted version.
But the interface usually goes from.
It's a real machriya. It's like the machriya beinayim. What does that sound? Okay, whatever. Yeah. So the whole story of Ayin Beis is a story of interfaces, and it was written in 1912 and started in 1912, which started a world where we need a lot of interfaces. We live in a modern world, and there's plenty to try to mix. Once upon a time, we lived in a very pure world, in a shtetl. Interfaces were necessary, but it was not as quite today. You have to have very good interfaces because we live in a very secular world and a very open world. And if you don't have proper thing, you either have to hide in a cave or you'll be completely destroyed. This Sicha Yutas Kislev, the Rebbe Mamish goes through everything. He says all the options that Jews tried and it didn't work. He says those that emphasize Rachmana Libabai, Says that was in the times of Alexander and Pilon did it. Pilon. He goes through Mamish history of all the different. He says that didn't work. The Greeks, the Greek Jews, that they tried. That should be Rahman. The Ikon is Neshama, not mitzvahs. Then he says those that went and said, let's cut the mitzvahs and tailor it. He says that didn't work. He says those that went to the language and said, let's keep our language. He said that didn't work. He says those that said, let's become like the Goyim. He goes back through every philosophy. It's made a dika Fabrenga. I always knew because there's also in the Fabrenga it talks about what I said, the World War One. The Rebbe in his most sweeping, the whole history. He's covering all of history. And it's basically that the young people want to hear a message not diluted. A take of dika message that you can change the world. He says they don't want to be told that you have to lift very little because you're weak. He says that's for babies. They want to be told that there's a revolution to be made. It's very good sikh, very powerful sikh. So bottom line is, where are we here? So Ayin Beis interfaces, and it all began with Kesser as an interface, remember that? And then went into the whole Sefirah. Now he's going back from the Sefirah, how it brings us back to Bleakville, back to Kesser.
Interesting interface. It's World War One basically that time.
Yeah. And you know that I did a trailer for right. It was 2 weeks after the Titanic, a few weeks after the Titanic sank. So I did a whole interface because the Rebbe Ayin Beis began a few weeks after the Titanic sank. The Rebbe Rashab said the Titanic was Keich Veitzim Yodi. It was like a symbol of, like some people are saying now with the hurricane. Look at New York. Everyone thinks we're self-made. Look, with all our technology, look what's going on here. A wind comes and it wakes everybody up. Ruach, Eisa Ruach. It's a wind. Yeah, September 11th. Yeah. The point is that since the Rebbe Rashab, clearly in the Sikhs, why he established Temchet Mimim and etc., was all about the idea of giving power to be able to confront the modern world and transform it. Essentially, the concept of shlichus in many ways. There's the Sikh Charfui Kol Yetzel Mechamas Beis David from Tafshin Beis Tafresh Samachalov rather. Interfaces, yes. So it's all about giving us So I did a trailer, I did a video, speak mamash about that. Why he said Ayin Beis in that kufa, and how Ayin Beis is like the antidote. Magdim Refu L'Mak. Because what was under the Nazis? It was all Keicher Heitzim Yod, in the worst possible way. And we are God. They said that we're Superman. It was like the ultimate self-worship, and what it did. So it was like an understanding. Look, Rebbe Rashab realized clearly that the ego is going to become very big with science, and without being checked, without a type of balance, without humility, you got yourself bad trouble coming. Arrogance, the arrogance of comfort, are far, far worse than the challenges of poverty. And the world, he understood the modern world was coming, and that's why the war against Mashiach, against God. I mean, everything is like. And it wasn't about defensive, let's figure out how to protect ourselves. It was about how to conquer it. Attack, influence them before they influence you, basically. The best defense is offense.
This is like the Zayah. It was hidden for 100 years.
100%. That's why I'm committed to doing this. That's why. I think it's the secret to everything. I don't just mean learning that. The whole thing is just an interface. It's tremendous stuff that can be derived from it. So anyway, let's go to Kuv Beis.
And this flow could be like the light at the end of a tunnel.
Hafla? Hafla? Light at the end of the tunnel? Light at the end of the tunnel is usually used for hope. That when things are so dark, you say there's a good ending.
But at that point, it's still beyond you. It's there.
Oh, you mean that? Yeah, in that sense, yeah. But the joke. The light at the end of the tunnel, some people think is the oncoming train. Which is even more depressing. Now, I know what you mean, but he's not speaking so much like he's speaking more that you comprehend something. From the comprehension, you come to a higher level of comprehension. The chiddush of Kuf Aleph is that it's in the world of Bina. It's not just it brings you to another world outside of the world of comprehension. Kuf Beis, okay. Kuf Tzaddik v'hine masha eru be'ein harech legaba atzmus. Remember now. Just want to repeat one thing I didn't repeat from the previous chapter to understand this. He said, if you remember, that Yidiyas Achiv, Yidiyas Ashlila, that was the key. You learn first what something is a chacham, until you come to understand that he's beyond that. So when you say someone is not a chacham, you could say he's not a chacham, he's not the opposite of chacham, which is stupidity. You could say not a chacham by the definition of what we call wisdom. His wisdom, it's not the wisdom that you understand. It's beyond that. That's Yediyas HaShlil, the ultimate. It's not Shelim as HaChachma to say there's Talshos. Okay, so then he says that's the Aflo of Eid Ein Sof, because Eid Ein Sof, I was attempting with Yechelis, but the key line that I want to say, because I see the first line in the next chapter was, what did he say? Where was it? Yeah. That Eid Ein Sof is beyond Chachma. He said, it's not even called Chachma. Because Eid Ein Sof is not like Chachma Stima. Chachma Stima is Chachma. It's beyond our Chachma, but it's still the category of Chachma. You say really, Shlil, you're saying it's not even in that category. And nevertheless, it's still in the world of Chachma. We're not talking about completely Atzmus Eid Ein Sof. Like the last line, okay. So now he says, because now remains a question, even though he's not saying it as a question. What's going on here? We just said that, okay, there's Chochmah as we understand it, revealed Chochmah. There's unconscious Chochmah, Chochmah Stima, concealed Chochmah, that we say is not revealed, but it's still you shale it from a metzias of substance of chachma, conscious wisdom, but you're still wisdom, as we discussed. That's like the 10 hidden spheres. Then there's even the etzem of the 10 hidden spheres. It's still the etzem hakayach. But now we're saying that God, you shale even that he's not even that. But you're still saying it's not atzmus. Because atzmus, they wouldn't even be gedder shlili. You wouldn't say God is not chachma. Atzmus is not even in the category of negating. So we negated it from anything we can relate to. So what is it exactly? It's not here, not there. That's what he's coming to explain now. So it's another step now. It's basically maven davar, meter davar. So you have from comprehensible chiyuv, direct logic understanding, you come to indirect logic.
Indirect logic
is the keich habligvul, yeah. Well, Tzilus reveals it all. Yeah. And now we're coming to understand what is this, when we say indirect, that he's not, but you're not talking about the etzem either. So what are we talking about here? So really what we're talking about is Eir HaBligvul. This is what we're going to discuss. So he says, V'hinei masha eiru b'cheina reich l'gab atzmus hazeh b'chinas bittul eir. When we say Eir is b'eina reich compared to atzmus, if you look at the last line of the last chapter, he said, She'eina reich l'gab eir in sof hamufla. So, hazeh b'chinas bittul eir. This is the bittul of eir. It's bottle. A second. Okay. Makom mokim. Nevertheless, it's still not true. It's not yet true sublimation. The true bittul is an atzmus ein sof baruch hu, which means hainu kamesh ein sof yudua ha'ina reich da'er shebein sof. In other words, there's two elements in air. If you talk about air, regular air, it's infinitely distant from atzmus, and it's bottle, but it's not true bittul. What's true bittul is atzmus ein sof baruch hu, the essence of the air. What does this mean? That in the Eir Ein Sof itself, it's known how distance, even light, is from the source. The kula kamei kalachashiv, because everything compared to him is like nothing. I'm just trying to see where exactly is this flowing out of. 1 minute. He said Aces like this. Okay. We'll understand it as he goes along here. What he just said now, that there's two levels in there basically. There's a level in there that is, bittul.
There's air inside.
Looks like it, yeah. Let me read on and then we'll see where he goes. Because I'm not sure exactly how this line is, the whole full context of it. For Ayin who, it seems to me that there's one thing there's bittul, and then there's a bittul that ends if you do ha'ina rech the air. The first one, it seems like the air doesn't really know how distant it is. It just stands in the bittul to something higher than it. The second one, it appears that it knows that it's completely irrelevant, so to speak. In other words, the air itself is not teifus makim. I'm just wondering how that fits into what we discussed earlier, because we talked about shlila. My understanding was that there's a level, atzmus is not, you can't even say shlila. You can't even say he's not chacham. When you say not chacham, you're saying it's eir habligvul compared to eir hagvul. So is this air really bittul or not bittul? That's what it seems like he's saying here. So he's saying,
not atzmus.
I know, I understand, but atzmus saying itself for all practical purposes is higher than even the eir habligvul. That's what it looks like to me. Because Eir senses that it's bittul, but it's still not the. Let's see what he's going to say with das. Okay, I'm just trying to put it in context. I'm not sure the exact flow here. But Inyan who the Inyan is the you do it, but Beis Day is the das and das tachten. We know that there's two perspectives. One is called das elyon. It's known about the two perspectives of das elyon and das tachten. One is das elyon means literally the perspective from above. Das tachten is the perspective from below. But whenever we say we look from the bottom up. You start with numbers and you come to quality. You look from the top down, you start with quality and you come to numbers. Yeah. Kavyachol. I heard that, yeah. Shehin dasa mashpia v'dasa makabel. This is the dasa mashpia, the perspective of the mashpia, the transmitter, and dasa makabel, the perspective of the recipient. Ve'in havchim zem. And they're opposites one another. The das tachtnu dasa makabel. Das tachten, the perspective from below is the perspective of the recipient. In the parentheses it says, Hein b'biyah l'gab atzilus, v'hein b'atzilus l'gab ha'maytz l'elya. Okay, that's very good. Both biyah, the created worlds, compared to atzilus or das tachten, and also atzilus compared to the emanator, the higher source, the emanator. So that's das ha'makab. V'adeihi, what is that perspective? What does it consist of? Shalamatu hu ha'yesh u'lamayla ayin. What that perspective says is, I am a yesh, I exist, and what is above, I don't know. Ayin. It's an unknown, it's mysterious to me. It's ayin. What? What is that? In other words, the reality is, what's reality is your existence, and that which is higher than you is beyond you. Compared to, yeah, ayin to motzah. Yeah. We're not getting now what Atzilus is Gilead Helam revealing. We're talking about more its sense of
something above.
Compared to, that's why he said it's all relative. Look, Atzilus is das elyon compared to biyah, but the das tachten compared to higher there. Yeah. Okay, good. So that's it. You're the yesh. Like the story with the chassid and misnagu, they say, or the chassid, they say the philosopher and the chassid, that he said, they're arguing about God's existence, and he says, they're frustrated, this one's arguing, and this one's arguing. Finally, the chassid says to the philosopher, look, I envy you, because you think about God all the time. I tell you the truth, I think about myself all the time. So he was very, flattered. Years later, someone said to him, is actually insulting you. Because you think about yourself, you think about God all the time, because you for sure exist. Your question is whether God exists, so you think about it, you ponder. Does God exist? How He exists? You're a reality. You don't have to think about yourself. He thinks about God all the time. He knows that God exists. Doesn't have to think about it. He questions if God exists. Do I exist? So he wonders, am I here? Am I not here? How am I here? Etc. Like the two ways, how would God destroy the world? One says, Halachas says you bring the mabul, then there's daim and the fire, and then you scatter the ashes. And the chassid says, God, what He does, He'll do nothing. He stops speaking. He stops willing. and the world stops to be. In other words, it's a perspective. Our perspective in life, as we talk the whole time, is yes. I exist, me. And we come to learn, and 1 second, it's not just you, there's more. Love teaches that, relationships teach us.
The chassid in the example you just gave, the chassid is always...
No, real chassid, yeah, because, but I'm saying how when we wake up in the morning. Yeah, we're not there yet. We want to be there. Or some people don't even want to be there.
But you explain that Atzilus is the ultimate alignment to Toldos, and it knows where its source is. So it's hard to imagine Atzilus being a yesh, because it knows where that its source is. I understand it's compared, but
that's the whole point of the hafla. You're asking a question that he's getting to. It comes down like this. In that sense, yes, Atzilus is not a yesh, but Atzilus comes to awareness that even what I am, all the midas that are aligned with Elikus, is far from the real Elikus, more than even the farness of yesh to Atzilus. That's the point. That's how far God is.
but it recognizes its source.
Yeah, but it's why is das Tachten?
That's why it's a yesh.
No, it recognizes its source. It's not.
No. So its Tachten element is that all its midas and Chachmeh is shalei be'erech to Atzmus. Even more than that's a nekuda. So I wouldn't call it. I wouldn't call it. When it means yesh, that's what it means. The yesh there is yesh more of that Chachmeh v'Atzilus, because that's its role. Look, you need both. Bottom line is we need Atzilus too, because you need to have Biyah. That's what God wants. He wants us to. But he's getting to that. That's the point where Atzilus compares. When Atzilus looks at Sefirah Sagnuzis, it feels completely its source. When it looks at Bli Gvul, it feels it's as yesh as much as Mamash Asiyah Gashmi. That's how far it gets.
And Bli Gvul, when it looks at Atma, it feels the same way.
Yeah. We knew that you had to.
So maybe that's connected.
Well, but let's read it through, because I don't want to speculate. Let's see what his ace is. I'm not sure exactly how to phrase it. We're jumping a bit. We're already such experts. We already know what the Rebbe Rashab is going to say, right? Okay, so he goes like this. Yeshamit lemata ayin. V'yuvin ze be'elmis biyah legab atzilus. He may even say beferish what you're asking. He may ask it, and we understand this in elmis biyah compared to atzilus. Dihine elmis biyahim nivroim uchodoshim ayin liyesh b'bchinas mohusim etziz dover mamish. Because biyah, let's define biyah. Creations that were literally mechudoshim. What means new? Nothing is new. Everything comes from God, but they're new in the sense that they're not revealing divine. They're about themselves.
They feel new. They feel.
Right. So ma'ayin liyesh, b'chinas mohusim etziz dover mamish. They're literally a distinct personality and existence. Ub'chinas hagbola, and a defined, confined, and defined she'ena be'erech ein seif klal. Compare it near ein seif, you juxtapose it to ein seif, it's infinitely distant. It's as distant as it gets. Obviously, this could be even, Bayah could also be concealed more and more to the point where ein niva af seid. That's like in the Halamazah Gashmi Achurmi, like the Alter Rebbe says. U'makol mokim mislabish b'teichem er v'chayis aliki la'chyesam. Nevertheless, something is giving them life. A stone, an inanimate stone. Fine. It's a dover chiddush, it's a new thing. It's completely, infinitely distant, but something is in it, manifest in it. Remember, he said it's an oifen of his slapshas. That's how God created. He didn't create an oifen of, I can do anything I want. The energy, like I said with the child being born, the fetus, the soul grows with it. It's not like something you pop up, a child is an adult, and you have a soul in. First time God did it, He took a lump of clay, a lump of earth, and He put a soul in it. But after that, it grows. They grow together. So there's a slapshus. What's the slapshus? Er v'chayis aliki la'chyesem shebabahem b'chinas slapshus pnimi mamish. It manifests in them in a completely enclosed, in an integrated, internalized way. That's sensed and uncomprehended by creatures. We said it in the last chapter. If you remember, he said 2 chapters. Bina is like neshama. What's a neshama? You sense there's a neshama. You may not sense the personality of the soul, but you know there's a life force. I feel life. I see life. It's undeniable. So basically, there's a life force. I'm not getting those people want to say that life force is not God. That's another story. But to say that something, a corpse and a body that's alive, is not, it's recognizable. It's not. We're not blind to the fact. So there's an energy in there.
Even though they're originalists, it's slapshas.
Yeah. I just said I just used the example because it's much more easy to see when a seed grows and into a fetus. You literally see that it's happening in a tailor, like it's tailored to it. Yeah. So like the supernal angels. Because they're in Biyah. Remember, angels are in Biyah, not in Atzilus. There are some, but generally we say that angels are Srafim in Bria, Efanim in Nasiya, and Chayes Akedesh in Yitzira. So they comprehend the Eir. They comprehend and relate to the divine energy that is manifest in them. Like it's known with the Srafim, they say Kodesh. You're holy, you're removed. Why are they saying Kodesh? They're not just lip service. Because they comprehend, they perceive something that's awesome.
A flaw.
And how Atzmus Ein Sof, the divine essence, the core of the divine light, energy, is Kodesh, is holy and removed from them. And it says, Srafim Eimdim Memale, that the Srafim stand above him. What does this mean? Above the Shem Adnai, which gives them life. So what means they stand above it? This is, by the way, where the Baal Shem Tov brings proof that Mokum Shemachshat Shalad Misham Hu Nimtza. What means Srafim Amdim Mamale? The Srafim are here. Yeah, and what do you mean they're standing above him?
Above where they get life.
Yeah, because they are so burning up in passion to that, so it's as if they're there. That's the meaning of it. But here is
the comprehension.
Right. So he says, they stand above Shem Adnai, and that gives them life. Because they appreciate energy. If they didn't appreciate it, you can't say they're standing above it.
And that same thing destroys them.
Because, when you're standing here, you see someone, let's say, giving you, passing you something. You don't stand above him. You're just seeing him giving you something. They are understanding the chayas that is. They have comprehension,
But that same understanding destroys them.
Well, I would say destroy, consumes.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, but it's like a sneh that the fire burns with a sneh in uchel. Then we always have the next day. You say srafim again. Where they come from? New srafim maybe.
Right.
Well, they're burning with desire all the time. They're basically examples of fiery forces. Passion, constant passion. I don't think they burn out. It doesn't say that. It's like the sun. It's self-generating. It's the constant state of yearning. I mean, it speaks about it. I don't think they burn out. I mean, they don't have children, so where the new Srafim come from? The only thing is, but maybe the flames send off sparks and new flames. I mean, fine. It's a constant process of consumption. Srafim. It's from the words. It's from Yecheskel, from the Nevuah of Yecheskel, from the Merkava. Okay. And comprehension surrounds, encompasses, envelops, is the right word, envelops the thing that's comprehended. That's why they stand above their life force. In other words, it's not just they're understanding something from a distance, the comprehension they have surrounds them. So I guess that means it elevates them to a place where they're like above the energy itself. That Mokum Shemachsham Adam is the main thing because of their mind is there. They really relate there, but he doesn't bring that expression. He's just saying because it's Makefis Aleh.
And Makefis includes higher.
Right. So in other words, it lifts them to a higher place, basically. In other words, when you don't comprehend something, you're not really there. Then, okay, I'm told. You say Mokum Shemachsham Shalom when you say the din. The Rebbe brings the din in Eidavin. As a dogma from Mokum Shachshav Shalom. What's the din native? And that if you designate a certain section, because your mind is there, it's considered as if you're there. Daitel, right. What? Yeah. Not Erev Tafshil, no. So the point being is that, why? But that's not superficial thinking. If you really love your child, and you say your child is a few thousand miles away, and your mind is with him, it's like as if you're there, because it's a deep, because that machshava surrounds you completely, and it's not just, it lifts you to another place. That's the point. If it's just a superficial saying, I know that there's a store down the block, you're not there. It's there.
Not surrounds you. Your machshava surrounds him.
So,
as if you're there.
As he says here, it surrounds the Dover HaMusik. Yeah, okay, you're right. Yeah, right, you're right. It surrounds the thing that you're comprehending. It surrounds the thing you're comprehending, and since what you're comprehending is the chayis, so it's like you're there. Right, okay. Good point. Yeah, no, correct. So lifts you to a place that's outside of yourself. Right, that's the point. It's interesting, yeah. The machshava me'elis. I'm the Rebbe would say, it's in that elevator. The Rebbe told, the Rebbe told someone, he said, Halavai, he thinks about me as much as I think about him. Huh? Yes, Duchna. 10%, that I didn't hear. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
This for sure.
It's a good lesson in life. Yeah. Because it surrounds them, surrounds the subject matter, right? And since they understand the chayis, so they stand above the chayis. Shemadnei, huh? Right, he's explaining how that even though Bria and Nivroim are infinitely distant, nevertheless they have a comprehension, just das tachten, comprehension. You can imagine there's a lot lower das tachten than this. This is pretty good, huh? Someone that comprehends God to the point that's how he's standing there. Okay. It's also known that the comprehension of angels, what they comprehend, the divine reflection, divine energy, that's their food that they ingest. Ingest is when you take it in, digest is when you process it. Yeah, Mazin Pnimi Shalem. It's their internal nourishment. This is also what makes their distinctions between them. One angel is different than another. They don't have bodies that separate them. Their distinction is from their comprehension. They comprehend differently. Since they comprehend differently, that's what's feeding them. It makes them different. He's not saying malachim. He's speaking about malachim. Yeah, but I wouldn't bring that because that's he's saying malachim intentionally. Because that's the creatures of Biyah are malachim, not neshamas. Neshamas come from a different place. They travel through Biyah.
No, but the same idea that they have no different. How do they separate it?
I don't know.
One person with this and one person that.
But why do you want to bring that here? Is something missing here?
I'm just thinking about it too.
I would not bring it here because it's going to confuse matters. Because souls are a different level. Yeah, you can say it's similar. That aspect is similar, but there's a lot of differences. So. Anyway, so let's go. In their comprehension of the divine and the way they serve. This one comprehends like this, and this one in a different way.
Even in the category of Seraphim.
Yeah, absolutely. Seraphim are plural, many. They're different.
Some of them comprehend differently than the others.
Absolutely.
The higher or lower.
Doesn't mean
No. That's for sure. But even within each world, for sure. Yeah, exactly correct. The Seraphim connect to Chesed, the Seraphim connect to Gvura. In Bria itself. It's both.
Because I'm trying to grasp it.
Why would you need to have more than one if they're all the same?
No, because some of them have better heads than others. I mean, what do you
not
mean?
Heads. Understand, what do you mean heads? He just said it's not heads. They appreciate the divine. 1 second. And if it's Seraphim in Chay's case, you have no problem.
Right.
But within Seraphim, you have a problem.
Yeah.
You explain that to me. They all don't have heads.
No, not heads, but I mean, what someone has a better.
Some Chesed of Bria, Gvura of Bria.
What
do you mean better? Different. It's not better.
Why shouldn't you have the same problem with
Chesed and Gvura.
There are a lot of Chayes and Kodesh.
What's that? Exactly. The one is Chesed, one is Gvura. It's not right. Yeah, that's what we're talking about. Yeah.
Not in the Asagya the key.
He didn't say more or less. He said different. It could also be the lower and higher. Malchus, for example, of Bria is going to be a lower understanding.
Doesn't mean no more or less.
According to their comprehension, is their service. It's going even further. In Ava itself, there's also levels. Not only between Ava and Yira. Even in one Midah, the Srafim are different. He's going really to the extreme. Remember, there's at the end of the day, there's infinite. The spheres are all interactive, interconnected. There's chesed shebechesed, there's gvura shebechesed. So you can, just like whatever distinction you have later, you have distinctions. As multiple as creatures are in this world, as multiple as angels there are. So that what distinguishes them, the different level of their Aveda, or their different level of comprehension. It's really the really goal here is to say it's ultimate gvul. You're talking about a multitude of angels, a multitude of levels of appreciation. All this is relevant because why we need to know is because this gives us the ability to have comprehension. Each of us is there. Ein day saying Shabbos.
What's a different Sheresh and Shabbos?
What's a Sheresh and Neshama if not Midas of Atzilus?
Right, so each one of the Neshama, us.
So the same thing. So the same thing is here.
Malachim, they have different.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That not only the different shaders, they are the shaders. They don't have a body.
They are the sherish.
In Bria, there are the sherish in Bria. I didn't say that. I didn't say. That's why I told you why you're bringing the neshamas here. The neshamas is just going to confuse matters. Trust me. Talk about angels. Angels are creatures of Bia. What? I don't understand. If I see a Gashmis could have billions and billions and billions of creatures, why can't a Bia have billions of billions? I don't see what the problem is. And what distinguishes them? The spheres distinguish them. What distinguishes them here?
They have no brains.
What does it have to do with... Look, everything is rooted in the distinction of the energy. Then it becomes distinct containers. A snake is different than a lion, not because it just has a different body. It's because they're different entities. They're different creatures. They have different purposes. Therefore, they have different bodies. And there's what's the problem? I don't understand. You asked me the question about multiplicity. You have here a world of billions and billions of things. You have 75 trillion cells in your body. You know that not two are alike? So why can't you understand that in Bria, in Ruchnis?
You could be trillions of cells, for sure.
So?
I'm just talking about the level of their comprehension.
What distinguishes one cell from another? A different level of energy. That's comprehension. Comprehension is a different appreciation of its level of energy. What's the problem with that? The cells of the brain, their comprehension is related to brain things. The cells of the liver have different type of cells. Their function is what the liver does.
And every liver cell is different.
Yeah. So we're dealing with every angel is an energy force there that's distinguished not by bodies. That's what he's saying. The truth is, even if they had bodies, that's not really their distinction. The distinction is their personality. They have different personalities. You ask me what distinguishes? How many? Let me ask you. There's 10 spheres. Do you know how many? Are there only 10? 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 times 10. It's billions. It's all those 10 in different configurations. So think every one of them is an angel that sits there and has that comprehension, and therefore it defines their Aveda.
Wow.
You mentioned ingestion. Makes some difference.
Yeah, so they eat different type of food. Their food is spiritual comprehension. Right.
Our food is also, but it's close to
Yeah, and it's even in Av itself and so on. And that affects their Aveda. Here we go further. Same thing is with the creatures below. The creatures lower than angels. That in them is manifest the divine reflection in a primis, in an integrated, internalized way, to the point that they actually feel, they sense the life force. Only the difference is that below, as opposed to the angels, the energy, the light is mistater is increasingly concealed. You see the life, but you don't feel that it's divine life. In the parentheses he adds now. Is this a long parenthesis? Yeah, not so short. Huh?
Sure.
It's around 6 lines, okay. And it could be to the extent that they could behave, they could even be contrary to the divine. The malachim el yenim, the supernal angels, the higher angels, they all feel life force. That's the key. Even the lowest levels feel a life force. But the higher angels, because they feel that the life is divine, they cannot defy godliness. God forbid. Lower creatures. And in truth is even lower, where the lower creatures who could, the fact that it could be, God forbid, opposite of godliness, that really is not because it's just concealed. It's because they also have a power of bchira, free will, that comes from a very superior power. Oh wow, that's a big chiddush. In other words, from the chayes being concealed alone, it would not be able to be against God. It would be concealed, so they may not have a deep appreciation of God.
Like a caterpillar, it does what God wants.
Right, exactly. Like Bilam, he said, I cannot defy God's will. Look what it says in the Geras HaKodesh 25. Huh?
Shimon ben Gedi, when he cursed.
Shimon ben Gedi. That God said, curse. In other words, you cannot do something without God's power. That's a Geras HaKodesh, the famous Geras HaKodesh, that when a person is kol hakayis, someone gets angry, it's like considered like idolatry. So he says, what's the eitzah? To realize that when something happens to you, it's from God. The person who did it, will be punished for his bechira. He had free will that was bad. That's correct. But the fact that it happened to you means you have to realize it's a lesson to you.
Ultimately punished if he didn't defy God.
He did defy. Who asked him to do it? Was who chose you to do something that's evil? Not that he did it, that it should happen to you. That's going to be the Geras HaKodesh. It's a whole chapter.
No, his bechira stopped him from cursing the Jews. So if his bechira, so he has.
Person has choice. There's no such thing as you being forced to hurt somebody else. If you hurt somebody else, you are going to be accountable.
He realized it, in the other sense he didn't.
No, we're talking about you or the person. Who gave you the right to go over and hurt somebody else? You made that choice. You will deserve.
He refrained from hurting because he said everything I have to follow God.
So that's why he pleased them. He has no punishment.
He did get punished.
For what? For giving a bad eitzah later. Because he gave them advice, but his nevuahs were the greatest blessings. He couldn't say anything.
At that point, he didn't realize he was defying God.
Well, more importantly, he was not defying. He actually said blessings. What do you mean?
At that point.
Later, he gave advice. That was his own thing. It's free. He could not say as a novi, as a prophet, he could not say something God did not put in his mouth.
Right.
Later, when he was no longer as a novi, as an individual, he had free will, and he gave an advice. You know what? Get the women of the Midianites to seduce the men. For that's Bilam had plenty of other things he did that deserved his punishment. But the blessings, the point is that it's two separate things. You know, there's no such thing as God choosing somebody to go hurt another person. That is impossible. That's why the Rambam talks about the Mitzrayim. Why were they punished? When God told Avram that they'll be in a land that's not there. So there's two answers. One, then God didn't tell any individual Mitzri to do it. You didn't have to be part of it. And number two, they did far more than what God wanted. God didn't say there's going to be a oppressive and murderer and so on. He said they'll be in a land that's not theirs. Could have been a minimal. We're also in a land that's not ours in the United States.
Let's see what happens in the next 4 years.
He thinks it's 40 years we're dealing with, or more. Okay. Stop being paranoid. Talk good with Zayn good.
Can I just ask one thing? Where does it come from? When someone wants to do bad to somebody, you need free choice. Why doesn't he want to do good? Just like he wants to do bad, he could want to do good. So where does it come? It must come from somewhere.
It comes from your free will.
I didn't say no. I asked you where it comes from. Yes, that's
God gave you a power to choose. As simple as that.
So that's my question. Why do we?
God gave you a power to choose. It came from God. But the choice is yours.
What's the power to dislike comes from?
In other words, like this, we see more people doing in this car than in this car.
Because it's easier. It's easier because godliness is concealed in this world. Godliness is concealed. That alone would not be enough because caterpillars, like he said, and stones don't hurt each other. It's concealed. They may not know that there's a God, or they'll definitely not know the deepest levels. No, but that's part of God's plan. And you don't prosecute them. There's nothing wrong with them killing each other. That's not called hurting. That's called the way the nature works. That's not. We don't say that as a crime. Okay, talk about that. So, we human beings are able to not just that God has concealed like these stones. We actually can hurt each other. That comes from a power that God gave us the power. So it's discussed in my modern. It comes from the power that God Himself is not bound by anything. So He gave us a power that we're not bound by our natures. You can't control whether you're going to eat or not eat. You can't, for example, jump up 1,000 feet. That's not in our power. But you could choose good and evil. Everything else is chosen for us. Whether you'll be tall or short, whether you have blue eyes or brown eyes, whether you'll be a long beard or short beard, whether you'll walk on Kingston Avenue or on Brooklyn Avenue. These are not choices. You're led by God's path. But what will you do when you get there? Will you help someone or will you ignore them is in your hands. This is not completely out of the subject. I don't want to even go further here. I'll tell you where to look. If you really care, look, Likutei Sichos Chelik Hey, Pasha Lech L'chom. Start with that. There's a whole Sikha. And there's much more than that too. There's a whole Sikha about Bechira.
I remember we ever spoke.
And Gersa Kedesh Simon Chafei that he just quoted. This is a side here.
Beautiful.
Yeah. I have no problem talking about it, but not right now. Talk about it. It's a different sugya, completely different sugya.
Sefirah are two sides of the same coin, but they're that high.
Anyway, Ava Margishim Es Achayis. So the Chiddush he says here is that there's the sense of life. He says so, and now in the parentheses he added also that they could be the opposite, but the truth is, what they're opposite, that's because of the free will. Because the energy itself can be concealed, but doesn't make them defy. Okay, they feel the chayis. We're still in the middle of the parentheses? Yeah. Huh?
You just finished the pool. Begin the line.
3 lines away from that.
Okay, no, we finished. We just finished the parentheses. He's going back to before the parentheses. What's before the parentheses? Let's go before. Okay, it's completely concealed. But you feel the energy. What does this mean? And the creatures are truly aligned to the chayis that's within them, like he said about the angels. It's like the Muslim. Well, the chayis is what shapes them, defines them, like he said. And the energy of them is in an internalized way in all creatures. This is the whole reason we have all the tzimtzumim. Because you need the power, the divine power that gives them life, sustains them, to conceal himself in a great tzimtzum, a great concealment. So he shouldn't transmit only a minimal reflection. That would be commensurate to manifest inside of the finite creatures. Because if he's not manifesting them, why do you need tzimtzum then? God can just, create, and that's it, it's there. It's because, like we said earlier, he wanted it to be in a logical way, in a logical progression. That's why he created Atzilus, and Atzilus is, and all the levels within, each level diminishes and conceals the energy until it manifests. So this just demonstrates that. So that's why you need all this tzimtzum in order to manifest. We also have to say, we also have to say this reflection that manifests inside the creatures are somewhat of substance. Being that it's sensed and comprehended by the creatures, you have to say that the reflection itself is also now taken on. In other words, not only did it go through concealments, but the reflection itself, you have to say, has taken on some type of substantial nature, which goes back to the whole discussion of how there's particles, not just wave. Yeah. And what is this in levels? This is only the lower level of Malchus that's called Dvar Havaya, the word of God, speech of God. That manifests, that comes in a manifestation, enclosed in the creatures of Biyah. If you remember when he began discussing this in chapter 95, he spoke about the higher level of Malchus, lower level of Malchus, the king who's beyond, Atu Kodesh, V'Shimcha Kodesh. So there's the lower of Malchus. The bottom line is it's a progression of levels that brings the energy in to manifest within us. Okay. In Biyah. But the core of Malchus, even of the lowest Malchus, that's when we say God speaks. Because speech, compared to thought, is a much more diminished dimension. It conceals as it reveals, as we discussed as well. Aval atzmis b'chinas hamalchus, the core of malchus, level of malchus, l'mayla mislapshus be'elamis, is higher than manifestation in worlds. Ve'einu musig b'hem klal, and it's totally not comprehended by the creatures. V'zeh inyan das tachten. All this is das tachten. This is the lower perspective. Shalamayla yesh, shalamata yesh. That below is a yesh, an ego, a sense of being. Hainu ha'oreh lekish musig b'hem. Because we're talking about das tachten. We're not just talking tachten. What is the perspective of the divine on below? That's what he means here. The perspective of the blind below is that I exist. What is the I? That's the reflection of the divine that's comprehended in you. Means it's divine. Whether you know it's divine or not, it depends on the level. The malachim know. We may not know. We go against is based on bchira. But there's a level of awareness. We have awareness of life force. We're not inanimate stones that are not aware of a life force within us. That's a divine life force. So that's das tachten. The perspective of the divine energy below. That's what he's saying. Okay? That ha'ara itself is a form of yesh. That's why he made the case that that energy itself has become like a container, essentially, like a something of substance. By the way, Eiris and Kalim can be explained exactly like this. Oyer is a perspective of above, and Kali sees it from below. It's sensing godliness. But it senses, I exist, I'm Chachmeh, and I realize that God is giving me energy. That's what he's saying here.
Also, no, but he's saying even more. He's saying that the yesh is really the energy.
Yeah. Not just the container, not just the receptor. Yeah, absolutely.
That's a direct
Yeah, that's what he said. He said, I mean, this is really what he said, that Eiris become, have...
So the yesh has a direct connection, but there's not, and the auras have like an interface of Gili from the top to the bottom.
Yeah. He's not going into this right now, but right now he's just talking, that's right, you're correct. He's talking even the Eir here. The Ha'ara al-Akiz, the divine reflection within, is manifesting them as in a form of Yesh. You hear this? Now he's adding. And through comprehending, it becomes even more Metzias. By comprehending it, because right, you're comprehending something, so the more you comprehend it, the more Metzias it becomes.
That's the Keli?
I don't know if that's the Keli. I just gave an example. He's not talking about Eiris and Kalim right now. He's talking about Das Tach and Das Ai. This is Eir and Keli. This is Eir and Keli together. Well, Lamaila, and what is this Lamaila? No, Lamaila, that's Lamata. Lamata is Yesh. He's talking Das Tach. The Damata is a Yesh, or the Kis, and he becomes more of Metzias. And what is Das Tachton? What's Lamaila when you say from the Das Tachton perspective? Well, Lamaila ina b'chinas ha'atzmis the Malchus, or Kolshkein madregas ha'atzmis da'atzilus shel Lamaila masargosim hu ayin. So Lamaila, which means, so this is the atzmis. The ha'ara of Malchus is the yesh, and the more it comprehends, the more it's me. It's I exist. And what does it say? What's Lamaila? How does it see above it? It's Yesh Ma'ayin, Yesh Lamata, and Ayin Lamata. Why? Because how does it see the core of Malchus, and especially the higher levels of Atzilus, that's higher than their comprehension? That's a state of Ayin. It's a mystery. It's an unknown. We're talking here about Atzilus, okay? So, he talked obviously before, he spoke Biyah, but now he went back to Atzilus. Okay, no, you could say Biyah with Malchus. The outer level of Malchus gives life to Biyah. That's the point. So Biyah, which is Das Tach, so what does it see? It sees Ha'ara. The Ha'ara sees itself as Yesh. It's an existence. And it recognizes that which is the core of Malchus. And especially the higher spheres of Atzilus. That's Ayin. That's Eina Musik. That's the higher from my comprehension. V'nikra Ayin she'eina Musik. Why is it called Ayin then? Well, it means nothingness. Because it means it's not comprehensible.
One second, what question?
Incomprehensible.
So the Milo, is that comprehensible?
Yeah, Matas, comprehensible. It understands.
No, the Milo to the Matzo.
No, that's incomprehensible. So what are you saying?
Not comprehensible. So what's the difference?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Again, so explain it.
How does
You
the
said-
Milas-
How does the Matzo?
We're not talking. We're only speaking now Mamat Lamaila. He's not talking about that. He's not talking about that.
I'm going back to what you said. I'm going back to.
He just said a whole length explanation that the angels. One second. That the angels and the creatures comprehend the divine internally. They see it. They comprehend it. They experience it.
That's the Milo.
No, that's not Mila. That's the Mata.
Looking the Milas.
That's the
What do
Mata.
you mean? Okay, cool. I'm sorry. I don't understand. What do you mean? they comprehend eternally the what? That they're the yesh, and that's
No, they comprehend the divine. They see life, a life force that's giving me energy. Every malach sees it, and he burns up with it because he appreciates it.
So
It's appreciation of life.
What's the difference between Mata and Mila then?
Mila is the things he doesn't comprehend, the higher levels of godliness.
He doesn't comprehend it.
Yes, he does. He comprehends it.
Mila will comprehend.
No, it's not Lamaila.
It's not a level.
No, he burns up because he's comprehending it.
The extent he
He appreciates, like we appreciate, like you appreciate you have a soul inside of you. You know that it's there. Then there's things you don't know.
That's right. There's no sense of Atzmos necessarily.
No, he doesn't. You don't even got to go to Atlas.
No.
That's it. Malchus.
But we have a sense of
So you say when
you're saying that he's a yesh, he feels himself a yesh, and that's I.
not only he feels the yesh, the chayes itself is a yesh. Because it's manifest inside a creature. It's like the life force in existence is a substance dover. He doesn't know. Who told you that? He does know what it is. He knows it's a life force of the divine. The things he doesn't know are ayin. The things he knows are not ayin. I don't know. You're going in circles here. I know what the word lamaila means. I just told you, a person, there's a life force inside something. That life force has taken on shape. It's giving life to a stone. Or it's a malach of bria that has that's consumed with the chesed of bria. This is a comprehension. It understands. And that's the yesh, the comprehension, the ha'ara that comprehends. Read it inside. And then there's the things it doesn't understand, and that's ayin. The higher levels it doesn't understand. I don't know what there's things we understand, the things we don't. Not only is it ayin because you don't understand it relative to you, it's also she'ena bechinas mitzias davar. This is like the tivuch here. It's also because it's not a mitzias. It doesn't have substance. The mishum zeina b'asogas and evroim, and that's haba hataya, and that's why we don't comprehend it. No, the yesh could only comprehend the yesh. In other words, the energy of the divine, when it manifests, it takes on the personality of what it manifests in. That's why it's like a mashpia that's speaking to this student, so he's now in those terms. So in a sense, that even the hashpah itself is in the form of yesh. That's das tachna, the das hamakabel. Right. So the energy is in the state of yesh, and definitely the recipient is. Then there's a level that is beyond comprehension, the higher levels. The core of Malchus, the higher levels of Atzilus. And there, the Malachim, or everything from Biyah, say it's Ayin. Why initially Ayin? Because I don't know what it is. I say, what's that? It's a mystery. Then he says, no, it's Ayin because it actually has no substance. And because it has no substance, that's why I can't understand it. It's not just that it's an Ayin like relative to me. It's fundamentally a different dimension. Good. Umamayla lamata, now goes mamayla lamata. B'chinas das elyon. This is now we see it from the top down. What's das elyon? The state of das elyon, hu lehepech, the opposites. The atzmis hamalchus, umadreges atzmis datzilis, the core of malchus, and the core of atzilus, b'chinas yesh amiti. That's the real yesh, true existence. Like I said, what's real? Am I real or is God real? That's the real existence. Well, the gaba atzilus had a kol. And compared to Atzilus, everything that lives, all the inhabitants of earth. That's an interesting expression called Daida Ada. It's that all the creatures of earth are like nothing. Here too again, not just the creatures. It means also the reflection, the divine energy that is manifest in those creatures. Is only a reflection of kalach and like nothingness, nullified, legaba atzmis, compared to the core, harizeh b'chinas ayin. So it's a state of ayin.
So somebody who's a yid from it.
So ayin amit. In other words, the ayin of Elokus sees the yesh as ayin, and we see, and the yesh sees itself as it. In other words, what's reality? Who's real?
Because we see it as ayin because we can't comprehend it.
And also because it's not substance.
So that's why we can't comprehend it. But Lamaila, they see us because we're talking about
it.
Not because they can't comprehend it. It's a little different.
No, it's also, but the question is what's real? What's the yesh? Is it yesh amiti? What's the real it? What really exists? Is it us or that? That's the question here. Yeah.
But it looks at us not because it can't comprehend it. That's why it's Ayin.
It doesn't have that element. First of all, probably can't comprehend it either. It doesn't relate to it. So, but that's another story. That's like it's a mystery. The soul doesn't look at the body and says, "What is this thing?" But not for the Griyusa, not Lamayus. It's like like the Bacha that says it's not. She doesn't look like Malchus.
How does it show like the Rebbe or the Alter Rebbe or whatever? And he looks at us as like creatures. I mean,
that you're jumping to another level because there's a place where Das Tachten meets Das Elyon. You're not there yet. I know you like to go there, but that's not there. We're not there now. These are two perspectives. These are very different perspectives. Ultimately, a Rebbe has Das Tachten and Das Elyon together.
That's why it's
so that's what's the Kinyan.
No, that's why it's Rebbe.
Right? Because if not, you wouldn't be able to speak to you on your terms.
That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Okay, but we're not there yet. We're not sort of at all. It's not the end of the Hemshech. In 1,000 pages from now, he speaks about it.
But now you're talking about Atzilus looking down, Das Elyon,
It's Atzilus, but we're not. But that's it. We're not. And down below is Ayin. We're not talking higher than Atzilus, and we're not talking Atzmos here for sure. Not. We're talking about two perspectives, two completely different perspectives. The last words of the Rebbe Rashab in his life, one of the last words was the last night of his life. You look in Shkafta the Rebbe, he says that Anashama Gate Areis. No, that's based on Allah. He says Anashama Gate Areis from the Chibur from Yichud Das Elyon and Das Tachten. Gate Areis.
What does that mean?
From the Chibur from Das Elyon and Das Tachten. Yichud Ilah, Yichud Tata.
From that frame, like from
he was. I'm afraid to translate. It's going to cause it may break your circuits. Yeah. And Sham expires in the unity of the higher and the lower unity. Yeah. This was heard by people. I mean, he was officially delirious when he said this. But, it wasn't delirious. It was pretty cohesive.
They all converge.
He had a very high fever, and that's one of the... It says in Shefta Rebbe. Yeah. Yeah. And we learn Ayin Beis, you see what the meaning of that word is. Mashiach is the unity of Das and Das Tachten. That's the truth. So it's impossible to really experience in our time. Because that there should be both completely from the existence of the world and together with the perspective from above, and they both join, that paradox is ultimate Mashiach times. Today we talk about it. Okay, so here we go. Yesh Amiti. Okay, this is all the first way he spoke. Atzilus and Briyah. Now he's going to say, so Atzilus and Briyah, we have the Dasa and Das Tachten. Now he said, remember in the parentheses, that this is also Atzilus compared to the source. So now he's going to say, the same things with Atzilus compared to its source, the emanator, blessed be he. That in general, the two levels of the higher perspective and the lower perspective are the two levels of Mamala Kalaman and Sevav Kalaman. Immanent energy and transcendent energy. The Mamala Kalaman Mamala Kalaman is the energy that comes and manifests in an internalized way, integrated way in the world, in existence. Those are the energies of Atzilus Shem B'chinas Islapshus B'Kelim that come and manifest in containers. And now it's all coming together here. Shabi Islapshus B'chinas Isardus Mamish, and this and within that Shahi Islapshus, because this manifestation and in clothing is literally in a oneness. It's one, becomes unified. Sha'ir Murgish Umusik B'Keli. The energy is sensed and comprehended in the container. Like it says elsewhere at length. And of course he discussed this till now. This whole thing is that the containers and the energies all become one. That's Mamalaklam. And the general energy like this, and this general energy it came in a way, manifest, Shabbat, transmitted in a way through a tzimtzum, through the concealment, that was transmitted only a reflection. Because the core essence of the divine energy cannot manifest. It's not in the category. It's not even in the. It's not begeder. It's not. in any possible way that it's not even that world, that league, to manifest in containers. V'gam b'zeh b'chinas das tachten hu das hanetzolim shalamata hayesh. And also in this level, which is the Malklam, is the level of das tachten hu das hanetzolim, which is the perspective of the netzolim, the emanations of Atzilus. In other words, he's now speaking broader. Before we spoke das Elyon, das tachten was Atzilus, was das Elyon, and Biyah was das tachten. All of Atzilus. The Malchus, the Atzmis of Malchus, and the Atzmis of Atzilus. No, that's das Elyon, and das tachten is the Chutzenis Atzim Malchus that comes into Biyah. Yeah. Now he's saying that in general this is Atzilus and higher, because in general it's Mamala Kalam and Seviv Kalam. So in Mamala Kalam, which is Edus of Atzilus and Kelim, the Gam Bezeh, and this, there's a level of Das Tachten. Also here. What is a Das Tachten? Hu Das HaNetzolim Shalamata Hayesh, which means the perspective of the Netzolim, we're talking now the Edus and Kelim of Atzilus, is that Lamata Hayesh, that below is a Yesh, referring to, not Yesh, as in Yesh, it's referring to the reflection of the emanator that radiates and is comprehended what? In the Eris and Kalim of Atzilus. We obviously have to understand the difference between that perception and the perception that he spoke before in Biyah. I'll get to that in a minute. We spoke about that before. Well, Lamaila, from this perspective, that's Lamata, meaning Atzilus. And what's Lamaila, higher than Atzilus? Hua Ayin. That's the Ayin. Hainu b'chinas Eidin Sof HaSev Kalam. That's the transcendent energy, the infinite divine light. Shalamayla Masaga, that's higher than comprehension.
He doesn't even talk about the Kelim and the Eris versus like the Kelim would be bad and the Eris would be minor.
No. Like Chochmah, the Chochmah of Atzilus, Ma'ayin Timotza, from where it comes from Ayin. Sha'keser nikra Ayin, mepnei she'enu b'chinas mahusum etzias ha'Chochmah klal. Because Keser, compared to Atzilus, is a level of Ayin. Why? Because it's not of substance. It has no personality or substance of Chochmah at all. And it's completely not comprehended in Chochmah. That's how Atzilus looks up. From the emanations to the emanator. That's the lower perspective in Atzilus. How does the emanator look at the emanations? How does the emanator, the source, look at the emanations, which is Atzilus? That's the level of Das Elyon. How Seviv Kalam looks at Mamala Kalam. That's the real itness, the reality. And that's the level of the core, the infinite light, not the energy that is manifest in Atzilus. Well, Lamata Hua Ayin. And Lamata, and Atzilus, that's the Ayin. Shekol ha'eris, v'amshachas ha'chayis, l'hachis ha'elimus, v'animroyim him rak ha'ora levad. That all the reflections and all the transmissions and energies that sustain the worlds and its creatures, they're all only a reflection. V'kuli kamei kalocha shev mamish. And they're all nothing compared, all nullified compared to him, compared to him, considered nothingness. Mamish, literally, ulakach nikra ayin. And that's why that's called ayin. Now, obviously, he didn't finish the topic. He's going to go back to Maven Dover, Metech Dover. How does this fit in with the whole Yediyas Achiv, Yediyas Ashlila? What's going on here? Like, that's the thing. What's not the levels are not defined here.
Interesting they called Sefirah, they called it a mindset. They called it mindset.
Yeah. In this context, is the Maitzel. Yeah. Clearly, the Sefirah Kalam is Bligvul. This is the Eir HaGvul, that's for sure, that he's going to. But the next chapter is obviously going to be the key, bringing it all together. That's why I said this chapter, after we learned the previous chapter talked about Dover Metech Dover, from comprehending Chochmah, you come to understand, Bina comes to understand, Pnimius Bina, that flaw, the grandeur of the spheres, the higher level. All this is coming to explain, remember, this is all coming to explain how Shemayim Mesaprim, how the 10 spheres tell us the story of the infinite light. So he didn't yet tie it all together. We're still in the middle. There's another chapter for this. At least another chapter. Yeah. The normal chapter then comes after the next chapter. We go to the third interpretation of spheres. So there's one more chapter that ties it all together. Next chapter is going to be a key one, 103. I don't know. He didn't say yet. I don't want to say. But, I don't want to jump the gun. I want to kitzer. Okay, the kitchen. Yevayit inyan das techten das alien. I would even say, he explains the thing of das tachten, the higher perspective, the lower perspective, the higher perspective. Das tachten mamat lamayl. The lower perspective is from above, from below up. Shanivri yesh. The creature is a yesh. It exists. Let's define yesh. Yesh means reality. So ask someone, what is reality? They'll say, my table, my chairs, me. God is abstract. I believe in it. It's not my reality.
Right.
It's not my world.
Yeah, exactly. Now, if you ask the perspective from above, it says that's reality, and this whole creature, that's the novelty. That's the novelty. It's put there. It's there, but it's not the real thing.
It's not even
What's the real thing?
It's a different level. It's not Ayin Beis or
In broad terms, it is.
in broad, but in a way, it's really not, because Ayin means that it's incomprehensible.
No, Ayin means two things. It's incomprehensible and also has no substance.
Right.
He said that.
Ischachus means that it's a novelty, but it's not incomprehensible. I think it's
Well, the word incomprehensible is not the main focus here. The main focus here is that it doesn't have substance. So from a point of view from above, the world below is really trivial.
It
has no substance.
Real substance.
doesn't count.
Because it's like looking, think of something that lives eternally, looking at something that's going to die. You know, you're here now, but you have no power of your own. You have no real value.
Yeah, but except
it's like a significant entity. Arrogant people look at this. They say some people are insignificant. I'm significant. You know, so insignificant thing is in the eyes of significance. It depends what's significant. Look, what we value is definitely things that are mortal, that die, and so on. I just heard of a guy that died with $2 billion left. He was alone. I told you the story here. No family. Government took every penny. Till his last day, he wouldn't give a penny charity because he was stingy. So where'd he go? So what's his hold? That everyone knows you can't take it with you, and they all worship it. That's you want to talk about how the yesh is powerful here. And everyone knows. It's not like a mystery. Everyone knows. No one even imagines you can take it. No matter how much money you have, you can't take it with you.
Even the election, it cost them $1 billion and nothing changed. $1 billion, they could have given it for starting revolution. Right?
Okay. So das tacht matl mel shanivre yesh v'gam ha'ora machayu hu mitzias musig. Here you go. You see that the nivre is a yesh v'gam ha'ora machayu hu mitzias musig is a mitzias, a comprehensible entity. V'atzmis atzilus ayin, and the core of atzilus ayin she'enu mitzias musig, because it's not comprehensible. Umamayl lamata. What's das tacht? And from above down, atzilus yesh. Atzilus is the real thing. And the reflection that gives life to energies is like is only a reflection. Is nothingness, relatively speaking. B'chein ba'atzilus, and same thing above. Atzilus, the same in the higher levels. Atzilus ha'er shebekelim hu musig. The energy within the containers is comprehensible. Ba'atzilus, and atzilus how is it b'chinas yesh? Netzel. It's yesh netzel. It's a substance that was emanated. Well, l'mayla ma'atzilus ayin. And that which is higher than Atzilus is like Ayin. That's his perspective. And from above down, the emanator is the true Yesh, the true entity. Ayin. And the is nothingness, is insignificant or meaningless. I just want to say, the big question that remains, if you want to just understand this chapter, is what's the difference of how Atzilus, what did he do? He just transferred the same idea from Biriya now to Atzilus. What's the real difference between the Yesh of Atzilus and the Yesh of Biriya? That's the real question. So I'll just say a few words about that and we'll conclude. We talked about it somewhat, but in different words. Remember we said about even Siyar Ruchnis is a big thing for us. But I think we can find words for it. You see, Atzilus we spoke is completely aligned with God. There's nothing that wavers. There's no absolute. Every chachma, bina, das, chesed is all aligned exactly the way God wants it. In Bria Tzir you already have a concealment. So even the malachim that understand, he said it's still manifest inside them. The main thing is me. So imagine a human being on earth, or imagine moments in our lives where you're completely dedicated to what God wants you to do. That's still not Atzilus. At that moment, your yesh, instead of following your own desires and own interests, let's say whatever 5 minutes you're dedicating to what the Rebbe wants you to do.
Bittul yesh.
Yeah, so bittul yesh, someone will ask you, what do you feel is real? You'll say, I'm real, but I'm subjugating myself to something I believe in, or something I know is true. Something I believe is more real than me, but I still feel my body. But there comes a point where you could have that dedication and actually forget your body. You could be committed to something and go all night and forget to be hungry. Doesn't mean it's going to last. But I didn't say it's bittul mitzvah. I'm just giving levels of bittul hayesh. So, but at the end of all of it, you're still in existence. What happened there? The question is how much are you immersed? So you can be immersed and say, even though I'm hungry, I'm doing this. You can say, I'm so immersed, I don't even feel I'm hungry. And that we all have levels of this. It all depends on your level of excitement or whatever, commitment, etc. But at the end of the day, this is more or less das tachten. I'm just giving an example in our own personal lives. It's not like angels obviously are all day like this, all the time. Well, we can be, but we can have a taste of it. So what you have here is that you realize that you definitely sense this world as reality, but you've learned enough chassidus, or you have enough commitment to say, I am putting this world aside right now, and I'm dedicating to what I have to do, or I'm using the world that I was given to fulfill my shlichus, whatever it is.
But angels have this all the time because they have no distractions on.
Yeah. Obviously, it's a different level, complete, like you said. And also here we have bechira, but let's take away the bechira part. The concealment is so deep here.
Right.
They don't have concealment. I mean, they have concealment, but it's only. But at the end of the day, what you're having here is a creature that's dedicating his life to the cause. That's the best that you have. Atzilus is not that at all. Atzilus is not a creature like us that dedicated. Atzilus is initially God's chesed, God's gvura, God's tiferes. It's a different world completely. We can't even really relate to it. The only thing we can give an example would be by Yidiyas Hashlila. By saying, what would be like somebody who b'chlal doesn't have anything of his own? He's a merkava, talakus. What does that mean? Every time he stretches out his hand, it's to help somebody. There's not even a consideration. It's not like he has to work on it. It's a 24/7. His body is God's agent. He's a merkava. Yeah. And everything he does. When he falls asleep, it's because that's the level that you have to have. When he's awake, there's no such thing as an independent agenda that he's aligning. He's aligned. His whole mitzvah is aligned. We can't really experience it, because we could definitely say, I know I'm not that way, but I could see, we believe that, when the Rabbeim speak and they say about the Rebbe, that every tenuah, literally, is aligned. The Alter Rebbe, that's what they said, every tenuah, every second. And so let me finish what I have to say, 1 second. Okay, that's Atzilus. So now, obviously, from the point of view from our Das Tachten, our Yesh, we look at something like that, it's pretty much of an ayin in that way. We don't understand it. We do understand the godliness within us. That's what we align ourselves to. We know that. But to fully understand that type of dimension of commitment is beyond us. Now, when you talk, that's now from Atzilus' point of view, when it looks at us, it sees that's reality, and we're like the weird ones. We're reality, and that's like weird. I mean, not weird in a negative way. It's like, that's a Rebbe, that's a tzaddik. That's not like a regular guy. What's a regular guy? He's like us. I mean, what's reality? What's I? That's more mysterious. That's the anomaly, the enigma. The mystery is that. Now, what about Atzilus l'gaba higher than Atzilus? So here is the key thing, and I think this is critical. Atzilus, we said, is completely aligned. So that's already for us a mystery. But let's talk from Atzilus' point of view. What does Atzilus see when it looks at God? Is God defined by Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes? No. So Atzilus recognizes something. So from Atzilus' perspective, I'm completely aligned with you. And that's my reality. My Chesed is your Chesed, divine Chesed. I have nothing of my own. But the mysteries of what you are beyond Chesed, I have no idea what's beyond Chesed or beyond Gvura. I mean, you could sense through Shlila. And so that is you see the Ein Arech what's going on here. That's Ein Arech that the whole structure doesn't. Even the structure, divine structure, is meaningless. Whereas by us, we're dealing with whose agenda is dominant. Atzilus is the question: is a divine structure define the divine? Is God defined by chesed, gvura, teferes? Even the most ain't safe, beautiful chesed. No, God has mysteries. As when Moshe says to Hashem, Moshe was in the Sham of Atzilus, I want to see your face. He says, you can't see me and live. He's not talking to Abriya, he's talking to Sham of Atzilus. Because you want to see me, that's beyond chesed, then you're no longer going to be Atzilus. There's no longer. I'm just trying to explain the levels of Ein Arech. It's not. We're not just talking about two yeshes. Well, yesh of Atzilus, a different yesh completely. I wanted to just clarify it a bit, and it's very relevant, obviously, to this whole climbing of the ladder. We got a lot of work. Our work cut out for us. Would you agree? Because we still got to go from a very lowly yesh. Okay, so we did chapter Kuf Beis 102, page 196.